2024 marks 135 years since tragedy struck a small town. On May 31st, 1889, an enormous flood ravaged the city of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, taking innocent lives and causing millions of dollars in damage. This disaster has come to be known as the Great Flood of 1889. I'm Ava Loy with MEA 100 News, and today we answer some questions that have plagued us all for years. How did this happen? How did the town react? And how are they still affected to this day? Here to discuss some of the weather patterns that led up to this catastrophe is resident flood expert Marcus Tyson. Marcus, can you give us some insight as to what led up to the Great Flood of 1889?
Yes, the weather in Philadelphia and the moments leading up to it were a major factor in classifying the Johnstown flood as a natural disaster. The several storms that devastated the Midwest as a result of a low-pressure system that was formed there. In the 2 days prior to the flood, there had been intense rain and a surge in river levels. Rainfall totals in Johnstown that night broke all previous records.
On May 31st, 1889, after a night of intense rain, Club President Elias Unger was shocked to discover that the lake's water level had increased by more than 2 feet.
At around 3 o'clock that afternoon, the South Fork Dam collapsed, bringing on a powerful and devastating flood.
That sounds awful. What had led to the dam breaking?
South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club members Andrew Carnegie, Henry Clay Frick, and other wealthy and well-known Pittsburgh industrialists controlled the dam, and they had altered it, unbeknownst to the people living in the area. They had built barriers to the overflow to prevent fish from entering the river below, which accumulated debris and eroded, eventually losing their capacity to contain the water rising over the top. There were also no discharge pipes to alleviate pressure at the foot of the dam. All of this was eventually found out after the Great Flood.
Wow. Greed and shoddy architecture led to this tragic event. Next, we're going to try and discern just how large and impactful this flood was. To help us with this, we have geologic surveyor Aidan Coleman with us here today to discuss this.
Pleasure to be here, Ava. So as Marcus said, the South Fork Dam had collapsed on May 31st, 1889. This dam was situated 14 miles upstream from Johnstown. And its breaking released an immense volume of water that surged downstream, headed straight for Johnstown. The wall of water was an estimated 36 feet high, traveling at speeds exceeding 40 miles per hour. The force of the flood obliterated everything in its path, sweeping away any and all communities and causing widespread destruction.
When it initially collapsed, the South Fork Dam spilled 20 million gallons of water in less than 45 minutes.
The magnitude of the Johnstown flood is best understood by the staggering loss of life and property. The tragic catastrophe claimed the lives of 2,209 people, making it one of the deadliest natural disasters in U.S. history. The floodwaters engulfed the town of Johnstown within minutes, carrying debris, buildings, and even human beings downstream. The destruction extended miles, leaving a landscape of devastation in its wake. The economic impact was also profound, as homes, businesses, and infrastructure were obliterated.
How awful. To think the failure of one piece of infrastructure can leave a disaster this large. To hear more about the societal and economic impacts of the Johnstown flood, we're going to talk to anthropologist Alejandro Rocinos Quiroz.
After the flood, the impacts to society and life in the area were profound. Around 2,209 people died, and around 3,000 people were known to be affected by the flood, whether it be losing loved ones or through injury. 1,600 homes were destroyed, and so were 300 businesses. It has taken nearly 5 years for the cleanup to be done, and bodies were found months after cleanup.
The tragedy still affects the town to this day. Melanie, who grew up in Johnstown, stated, "Back then, it was a thriving town. It's been pretty depressed ever since then."
The economic damages were great as well. There were around $17 million in damages from the flood. That comes to $475 million today, adjusted for inflation. Over $3.7 million were collected for the Johnstown relief effort from within the U.S. as well as from 18 foreign countries.
This disaster also led to changes being made in how dams were built.
Johnstown had faced floods before, confident that they could handle any flood until this one. It was said to have been avoidable because of the way the dam was built. From then on, dams needed to be built by qualified engineers.
Wow. After hearing all about the struggles Johnstown faced as a result of this great flood, we wonder, how do they adapt? What do they do to mitigate the situation? Here to discuss their strategies is historian Nathan Villaverde.
The recovery and cleaning of the city after the Johnstown flood, as Alejandro mentioned, took 5 years to complete. It was made possible by a team from the Army Corps of Engineers, along with thousands of men from all over the country, who used the rail lines to bring tons of machinery to rebuild the town. Many years later, between 1938 and 1943, the federal government created the Johnstown Local Flood Protection Project, also known as the JLFPP, which consists of 8.8 miles of stream channel improvements built along the Conemaugh, Little Conemaugh, and Stone Creek rivers. These improvements were created in hopes that it would protect their town from experiencing more devastating floods in the future.
The incline plane was also built in 1891 after the flood, so that citizens could get to higher ground and flee to safety. Former Johnstown resident Melanie states, "It's a way to escape if it ever happened again." Well, that's all the time we've got today. I'm Ava Loy with MEA 100 News, signing out.